Okay, I think that we can go ahead and get started. So Len, do your thing. Do your host
Okay.
thing.
I won't mute all at the moment. I'll just speak for a moment or two. I wanted to welcome everybody and thank all the participants today, of which more in a moment about each of them, but especially by now it should be clear, Karina, whose help is absolutely invaluable. And of course, I want to thank the major domo and impresario of metrical verse in the United States, Alex Pepple. If you don't know about Alex, he founded and edits Able Muse and Able Muse Press. He founded and directs the famous Erotosphere online workshop. His poetry and prose have appeared in a whole bunch of magazines: Barrow Street, River Styx, American Arts Quarterly, Light, Think, Journal, a whole bunch of others. And he also edited the Able Muse anthology from Able Muse Press. Karina is both the Zoom reading coordinator, which should be clear by now, and also Alex's assistant editor and copy editor for Able Muse. I'm going to do a brief introduction of our participant readers and participant translators who will be reading the order in which I present their bios. At the very end, there will be time for an open question and answer period. And then when we're all done at that point, I think I'll hand it back off to Karina. So without much further ado, I have a terrible memory, so I beg your indulgence. I apologize, but I'm going to have to read some of the bios. So if they sound that way, I'm sorry. We'll start with our first reader, who'll be Lee Harlan Behan, the author of 2 chapbooks of poetry, Migration Solo, Writer Center of Indianapolis, 1989, and Notes to Sing, Finishing Line Press, 2016. Lee also has completed 2 collections of translations, informed, and I think this is going to be the topic today, by Thomas Roche's theory that Petrarch's Rerum Vulgarium Fragmenta, RVF, also known as the Canzonera and Rima Sparsa, is structured according to the Christian calendar. This is a topic very near and dear to my heart because at the moment I myself am translating the entire Rima Sparsa. A Year of Mourning, she's also one of her titles from Able Muse Press, 2017. She was named a special honoree for the 2016 Able Muse Book Award. And To Wrestle with the Angels, sonnets from Petrarch's chapbook of 1337 from Finishing Line Press in 2018. Quite an impressive list of credits. Some of her magazine credits include Able Muse, Artful Dodge, Carolina Quarterly, the Hudson and Kenyon Reviews, North American Review, Plowshares, Plume, Southern Humanities Review, and Think. A translation of one of the Petrarch poems, RVF 269, December 30, appears online now in issue 129 of Plume, and a translation of RVF 22 April 27th is forthcoming in Able Muse. Our second reader today will be Jan D. Hodge. Though he has been writing poetry for 50 years, his first real, in quotation marks, book was published when he was 73. His poems have appeared in many print and online journals, including the North American Review, New Orleans Review, American Arts Quarterly, and Iams and Trochees. And in the 5th, that is the 2006 edition of Western Wind, famous anthology edited by Mason and Nims, and in the revised 2012 edition of Louis Turco's The Book of Forms. Taking Shape, a collection of Carmina Figurato, was published in 2015 by Able Muse Press, and The Bard and Scheherazade Keep Company. I love that title. Double dactyl renderings of several of Shakespeare's plays and tales from the Arabian Nights and of the medieval folk epic Reynard the Fox, also from Able Muse Press. Our third reader, an old friend, Maryann Corbett, spent almost 35 years working for the Office of the Reviser of Statutes at the Minnesota Legislature. That's statutes, not statues. Now retired, she is the author of 5 books of poems, most recently In Code from Able Muse Press. Her work has appeared in 32 poems, Ecotone, Literary Imagination, and Rattle, among many others. and in anthologies like Measure for Measure, an anthology of poetic meters, and a real crowning achievement here, Best American Poetry 2018. She is a past winner of the Richard Wilbur Award and, appropriately enough, the Willis Barnstone Translation Prize. Our fourth reader, Sally Thomas, is the author of a poetry collection, Motherland, from Able Muse Press 2020, and a novel, Works of Mercy, forthcoming from Wise Blood Books in the fall of 2022. She is also co-editor of an anthology, Christian Poetry in America Since 1940, due out from Paraclete Press in July 2022. Her poems have appeared most recently in Amethyst Review, Autumn Sky, Poetry Daily, 12 Mile Review, and The Windhover. Now we come to a very special, in a way, a participant in today's proceedings. A little bit about John Ridland. He attended Swarthmore College and received his PhD from Claremont Graduate School in 1964, spent 40 years at UC Santa Barbara, retiring in 2005. He was one of the founding faculty of the College of Creative Studies and a professor in the English department focusing on Robert Frost. Good for him. His work appeared in the Hudson Review, the Atlantic, Harper's, and a list too long to mention. His books include Ode on Violence, 1969, In the Shadowless Light, 1978, Elegy for My Aunt, 1982, Sonnet 6 Ballads, 1993, a Brahms Card Ballad, 2007, Happy in an Ordinary Thing, 2013, a Lincolniad, an epic poem honoring the memory of President who else, Abraham Lincoln, 2014, Epitome and Epiphany, 2017, and Mountain Music, 2018. With his wife, Muriel, whom we are greatly honored to have with us today, he wrote, And Say What He Is, The Life of a Special Child, 1975. He rendered Sir Gawain and the Green Knight into modern verse and was at work on a poetic translation of the Odyssey at the time of his death. I just want to add a personal note. I had, on two separate occasions at Westchester at the poetry conference, a delightful breakfast with John discussing Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. So miss him. Because of her very special presence here, I should mention that I will let Mrs. Ridland, Muriel Ridland, who will speak personally of her varied and distinguished work with her husband's translation, more or less present herself, and we will go from there. I'm now going to exercise my dictatorial powers by muting all and then asking Lee Behan if she will be kind enough to unmute herself and speak of Petrarch and begin her presentation. So here is muting all except for Lee.
I'm all right. You can hear me now. Thank you, Lynn, very much. Thank you, Karina. Thank you, Alex. Thank you all for being here and letting me play. Were the translations I'm going to read mapped onto the face of a clock with hands, they'd comprise 90 seconds of Petrarch's rare and Bulgarian fragmenta. At the same time, the poems distill almost 50 years of their author's life and 30 of mine as a translator. If you will then, hang on as the speaker's desire, an ancestor of Rocky Balboa's Italian stallion, takes us on a wild ride back to and through the 14th century. April 11, War Horse. My lunatic desire is so far off track in his pursuit of her who turned and ran, independent, agile and independent of love's tack, flying ahead quicker than I am, that he keeps going when I call him back to the high road and my voice fades, nor do spurs help, nor hauling reins hard against his neck, which love made recalcitrant by nature. So when I force the bit between his teeth, I still am in his power, and he gallops away with me against my will toward death, only to reach the laurel, where one reaps astringent fruit, which tried does less to numb a body's wounds than to set fire to. While Daphne's escape from Apollo's lust is a mythical source of the previous poem, the next reveals a real-world event which sparks the speaker's mythologizing of his life. 34, May 9, brown surcoat, green kirtle with dagged sleeves. Apollo, if your exquisite desire kindled by Thessalian waves still lives, and if you haven't sent with the spinning years her beloved blonde hair to oblivion, at the prospect of shipless ice and severe bad weather which, while you hide, won't break, look out for leaves we honor and revere today, where you first and then I got stock. And by virtue of the romantic hope which sustains you in a life gone sour, disencumber the air of every cloud, so we then both will see a marvel. Our Lady, seated on the grass, arms up, encircling her face, fingers linked for shade. The Dagged Sleeves poem was included in Petrarch's 1337 poetry collection as identified by Ernest Hatch Wilkins, and which I translated into a modern chapbook to wrestle with the angel, which I made complete with titles and epigraphs which Petrarch might have used. The collection opens, however, with the following ekphrastic sonnet about a sketch of Laura done by the painter who did the cover art for Ressa. 27, June 21st, on Simone Martini's portrait of Laura. It does have the These artists have joined in a trial of skill in the Amazons, which they have respectively made. Pliny the Elder, Natural History, 34.19. Were Polycletus and his fellow sculptors to try to see whose eye was best, they wouldn't catch the least part of the beauty sent to conquer my heart, not in 1,000 years. But my Simone was in heaven for sure when he spied this gentle emigrant and put her on a page to document the sheer perfection of her features here. The work is one of those you very well could picture in the sky, not with us, where members of the body veil the soul. It was a favor, nor could he do it after he'd come down to take on heat and cold and felt mortal at the sight of. A little deer in the headlights there. The Advent sequence concerns the speaker's flight from temptation and ends with a symbolic announcement of Laura's, oh, we have missed one. Excuse me, I pulled 2 pages. Well, let's go back. 185, October 7, sweet. This firebird artlessly from golden down at her beautiful nape, white and noble, fashions a necklace so adorable, it makes hearts tender and consumes my own. Upswept, her plumage forms a natural crown, lighting the air around her. Then and there, love's quiet flint sparks sheer liquid fire, which burns me when hard frost is on the ground. Wide azure bands festooned with roses trim her crimson surcoat, new clothes which disguise fair upper arms, both brilliant and unique. Tails locate and conceal in the perfumed and ample cleavage of Arabian peaks, this proud bird flying out provincial skies. Now the Advent sequence. The Advent sequence concerns the speaker's flight from temptation and ends with a symbolic announcement of Laura's death. This translation was published close to 30 years ago. Its more recently devised title tweaks Wordsworth. I keep an ear out. Let's see, 254, December 15, intimation of mortality. I keep an ear out, but receive no news of my sweet, beloved enemy. And I don't know my mind of words to use. Fear makes my heart race so, and such hope buoys me. Before now, beauty has undone a few, and she's more beautiful and chaste than any. Perhaps God wants a friend of such great virtues for earth's lighthouse, making her heavenly, a star, a sun. If that's the case, my life, my short rests and long breathlessnesses are over. Oh, stony casting off, why have you distanced me from my wreck and loss? My brief tale is already told, and half lived, my years cramped in their allotted space. Here is where I apologize for not realizing till recently that I should have translated and included 269 December 30 in a year of mourning, where the speaker processes his losses and from which I'll read 3 poems. I'm grateful to Plume for putting 269 December 30 online, and their translation editor is super. With our country nearing 1 million COVID deaths, resulting in many millions living without closure on top of bereavement, we can empathize with and appreciate the wit, dark as the dying Mercutios in Romeo and Juliet, of the speaker's rude epiphany about what the characteristic swellings of Black Plague did to Laura's beauty. I'll spell the title out. 276, January 6, B-U-B-O-E-S. Because abrupt departure from unhindered angelic apprehension of her has taken my soul to a sad, stumped, horror-stricken place, I attempt to put my pain in words. Fit sorrow, surely, leads me to lament. Love and the one who caused it know my broken heart lacks any other cure for sickening details which occupy existence. The one I couldn't handle, death, you finished. And where, earth, glad a human face so fine, is yours now to keep secret, watch, and cherish? Does that leave me disconsolate and blind, since I don't have the sweet, romantic, unblemished vision which induced my eyes to shine? My first residency to translate Petrarch was in Vermont, where Stephen Macaulay was writing a new book after the success of The Object of My Affection. Moreover, the Advent sequence, which Petrarch inserted into RVF during his last year alive, examines the treatment of women as things, broadening the significance of rerum vulgarium fragmenta. You can ask about Gentile during Q&A. 295, January 25, for Stephen Macaulay. My affections used to discuss their object quietly among themselves. She repents her pity's coming late. Maybe she mentions us, hopes, or is apprehensive. Robbed both of and from this life by her last instant, looking from the sky's vault, she detects and sympathizes with our predicament. Nothing else is left of her to expect. O Gentile wonder, O glad soul, O rare, superior beauty without precedent or copy, here and straightway gone home. There, a crown and palm attest her accomplishments, which brought worldwide fame to and made sense of her incorruptibility and my mad love. In the next to last sonnet of A Year of Mourning, the speaker returns to the landscape east of Avignon, where he more closely had loved Laura from afar for years, where her body is rejoining that landscape to pay his respects. The italicized title of this companion to 185, October 7, parodies a pop song's title, which parodies the title of a Beatles tune. 321, February 20, Laura in disguise at sunset. Is this my Firebird's birthplace, where she decked herself in gold and crimson plumes and kept my heart beneath her wings and is adept as ever at getting it to sigh and speak? Oh, sweet rootstock from which I grew sick, where has the face gone from whose good looks leapt sparks keeping me on fire, alive and wrapped? Unique on earth, you rejoice with heaven's flock. And since you left me destitute and lonely, sad to say, I always am returning where I enshrine and bless your memory, watching the shadows flicker, hills burning black where you flew into eternity. And once upon a time, your eyes created morning. A phrase from Moonshadow, a song by Yusuf Cat Stevens, is negated in the title of the final translation I'll read, one of the sonnets which Roche identifies with Lent at the end of RVF and the speaker's earthly life. Eclipses didn't prompt frolic in days of yore, but angst and worse. Still, the speaker vows to sublimate his grief, to make lemonade of lemons, medicine of bay leaves. 327, February 26, not leaping and hopping. Death, who empties the world, has done away with my sweet laurel's breeze, scent, cool and shade, and sight of the gleaming leafiness which made obvious where my tired life's rest lay. As is the sun to us, if the moon fails him, my star is invisible to me. I rave for death to foil mortality. Love has laden me with thoughts so grim. You've slept, beautiful lady, had a nap, now wakened among the souls of the elect, where the spirit enters the maker's rest. And if my poetry has any effect, sacred among the cream of humanity's crop, your name and your memory will last. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can everyone hear my voice? Well,
Yes.
oh, okay. We should all thank Lee for her presentation for translations. I believe we are now also still in mute all, and it would be the turn of Jan D. Hodge to unmute and present.
I'll be reading first from my book, The Bard and Scheherazade Keep Company. Thank you for liking the title. You're the first person I've ever heard say that.
Well, I'm odd. You can't tell.
These are adaptations, not translations, of stories from the Arabian Nights, Shakespeare's plays, and Reynard the Fox, all rendered in double dactyl stanzas with an occasional double amphibrach version thrown in.
Did you just say amphibrach, Jan?
Yes, I did.
Wonderful. I didn't think there was a person on the face of the earth who knew what an amphibrach was. That's wonderful.
Well, hold on for 5 minutes and you'll hear lots of them. This from the Arabian Nights, Scheherazade, of course, telling the story to Shahryar. The invitation to universal peace. Voice of the Dawn, who is known for his wisdom, One morning was walking when suddenly, Fox, certainly one of those aleatorical meetings not pleasing to wandering cocks. Frantically flapping, he managed a tentative refuge on top of a rotten old fence, where he probed possible extricability from a dilemma so parlously tense. Peace be upon you, brother, said Fox. When the cock answered nothing, he added, you choose not to address me. Your inaffability hurts, for I come but to bring you good news. Lion and eagle have issued an edict that all of the beasts, whether feathered or furred, live in benevolent amiability. I've been appointed to carry the word. Tiger and antelope, jackal and basilisk, hawk and hyena and pigeon and dove, all shall inhabit a paradisiacal garden of peace and of brotherly love. Old animosities must be forgotten, and any recidivist will be condemned. Fox's rhetorical armamentarium being depleted, his fancy was stemmed. Still hearing nothing, he snapped, and unless you embrace me, the fiat will not be fulfilled. Peace will become the new universality, even if half of us have to be killed. During these palpable illogicalities, Voice of the Dawn was too anxious to crow. His mind was otherwhere, preoccupiedly mulling a method to outfox his foe. Pardon, my friend, I meant no impoliteness, but as you were talking, he answered at last, I was distraught by some unspecifiable something approaching and coming on fast. Is it a greyhound? Asked Fox with a tremor. It might be. I think so, a beast of that breed. Well, that's disconcerting, for incomprehensibly, he wasn't thought of when peace was decreed. Brother, I leave you. That pimp of a greyhound can never be trusted. With that, he was gone. Mocking the fox's own pseudo-sincerity proved the salvation of Voice of the Dawn. Then pronounced Shahryar, ah, the unspeakable ideological balderdash only the shameless commit. Praise to Allah when such self-contradictory cunning is routed by wisdom and wit. And for Shakespeare, The Taming of the Shrew, written in amphibrax. The story's familiar. A blackguard in search of a fortune is courting an ill-tempered shrew, whose father deplores her anathematizing behavior towards all who might otherwise woo. Her sister Bianca has too many suitors to count, but her father will not let her wed until he remonstrates reiteratively his Catherine is married and taken to bed. Petruchio senses much more than a fortune and sets out to win her despite her repute, for he is convinced the denunciatory reports are uncalled for, and she is a beaut. He holds up a mirror reflecting her actions, denying her dresses and food and repose, apparently acting vituperatively. But it isn't brutal, it's right on the nose. A strategy rooted in fondness and proving more winning than when she was humored and bribed. And when she discerns his luxoriophilic intent, it was just what the doctor prescribed. She finds her true selfhood in loving and serving a husband who dotes on a spirited wife, since, rightly considered, propitiatory behavior's a sauce to the gusto of life. Forget all that fuss of Bianca, her suitors, her father's frustration, and even the gold. for they are the keenest demystification of well-suited lovers will ever behold. The husband's last wager provides us a further and fitting reversal, confirming this view. The context makes clear the identification we'd always suspected. Bianca's the shrew. A note on Luxoriophilic, a word I coined because it's a nice double amphorac. It's derived from uxorious, which means excessive fondness of one's wife. And so, luxoriophilic describes one who loves being excessively fond of his wife. A perfect characterization of Petruchio. The next poem will be from Taking Shape, my collection of Carmina Figurata. Thank you for it, Alex. My first book published at 73. I'll gloss a few Tagalog, that is Filipino words, before I read it. Odango sa Ilao is the lamp dance in which the dancers dance holding lighted oil lamps, flaming oil lamps in their hands as they dance. Tutubi is the dragonfly. Makahia, the shy plant, has leaves that close when touched. Sampaguita is the Philippine national flower and is often woven into garlands. And magandang babae means beautiful woman. I assume you have all of that now firmly in mind. This is the poem, Odango sa Ilao. The hands of the dancer, the rays of the flame, realize beauty as pure as the tutubi rising over the water and catching the moon on its cellophane wings. Stainless as rain on the palm trees of evening, modest as shy Makahia, fine as a tourmaline sky. How she enchants us. See how she glances aside as she weaves of two shining stars a cincture of firelight and fay, a magical purlieu. See how the golden white ribbons of light hang in the air, a garland of sweet sampaguita to accent her grace. Magandang babae, your dancing is like the play of the angel of light. Bless us with what you know, the soul of art and the joy of it. Here is what the poem looks like on the page. Paul Fussell argues that shape poems are necessarily compromised because the visual effect triumphs inharmoniously, his word, over the auditory experience. Quote, the two dimensions are not married. One is simply in command of the other. I read the poem before showing it to allow the auditory experience to speak for itself, as it were. I hope you agree that it works as a poem and that the auditory experience can hold its own against the visual. She is written in anapestic, a triple, traditionally feminine meter. The hands of the dancer, the rays of the flame, realize beauty as pure as the tutubi, etc., etc. She has a partner. He is written in iambic meter, traditionally a male meter. I haven't time to gloss and read him, but with St. Patrick's Day soon to be upon us, I offer this response to another of Fussel's claims. And I quote, "Perhaps the greatest limitation of shaped poems is the scarcity of visual objects which they can imitate. Wings, bottles, hourglasses, and altars. But where do we go from there?" Well, how about here? I assume you can all see that. It is written not only in shape, but in ballad stanzas. I will read the first half of it. A song for St. Pat's. If all the world be green, me lads, if all the world be green, we'll have us the brawliest bash, me lads, this land has ever seen. Let all the beer be green, lads, and nary a drop be spilled. Let all the beer be green, lads, and each one's cup a tilt. If, me lads, the beer be gone. What? The beer be gone? If the beer is gone, me lads, with the coming in of dawn, well, I will get us more, me lads. I will get us more. Because to drink green beer, me lads, is what the world is for. Or perhaps we could go to this. I grew up in small town Michigan across the lake from a carousel. And on summer nights when I was a kid, I could lie in bed and hear the carousel music coming to me from across the lake. Decades later, I wrote this poem called, strangely, Carousel. Why is a carousel sad and exact? Why is it turning forever around in my head? Why is its music, its movement, as real as glass? When, if at all, will the melody end? Dreamlike, my memories die into animals prancing around in a formal procession to nowhere. Calico horses pace up and down, and a tiger, a lion, a zebra move round to the music alongside a bracket of swans, as a host of golden-haired cherubs lean down from the clouds and throw kisses at cherubs that, reaching from mirrors, throw kisses at them. And kisses are lost on the wind, and the music and movement and kisses all waft over water to me. In this dream of a carousel, wishes hitch rides on the horses, the lion, the zebra, parading past mirrors where cherubs reach up from the sky to throw kisses at cherubs who ride on the soft light of clouds. And kisses and horses and wishes ride sadly around and around till they waste on the wind. And music comes over the water to call in a sigh for a circle of animals lost in a song on the wind. It is written in triple meter. I was once told that men can't handle triple meter. Oh well. It is written in triple meter to suggest the waltz time of the carousel music. It begins in dactylic. Why is a carousel sad and exact? Why is it turning forever around in my head? And shifting midway to anapest, which is its opposite meter. In this dream of a carousel, wishes hitch rides on the horses, the lion, the zebra. Just as the images from the first part of the poem are picked up in approximate reverse order in the second part of the poem. Where do we go from wings, bottles, and hourglasses? Well, I guess we can go in lots of places. As you can see behind me, some of my other Carmina are framed on the wall. Thank you. Oh, one footnote. This is encouragement to all of you young writers. This poem, The Carousel, was rejected 28 times before it won first prize in a national competition. Persistence sometimes pays off. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jan. Jan, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes. What small town in Michigan?
Hazlitt.
I was born in Battle Creek.
Oh, you were?
Well, somebody
Hazlitt.
had to be.
Hazlitt is 6 miles from the Michigan State campus.
Oh, yeah, East Lansing. Okay,
I went
thank you.
to, I went to Michigan.
So did I.
I know.
Thank you very much. That was delightful.
Thank
We're still, I believe we're still under the mute all dispensation here. So we will ask Maryann Corbett if she would be kind enough to unmute herself.
Have
Thank
I
you.
succeeded?
You have.
Excellent. Then I will go ahead. I will be reading from John Ridland's translation of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. Before I start, I'll say a bit about why a poem in Middle English needs to be translated at all. Chances are pretty good that those of you listening have read Chaucer in the original and know that one can make sense of his language in the original with little trouble. That's true because our modern English is descended directly from his East Midland dialect and shares most of its vocabulary. We're comfortable too with the iambic pentameter that he used in most of the poems we're likely to read. But the anonymous poet who wrote both Pearl and Sir Gawain and the Green Knight wrote in the Northwest Midland dialect, and many of its words and spelling conventions are not familiar to us at all. The meter he used in Gawain, the alliterative long line, is one that has gone out of use in modern poetry. Most translators who tackle Gawain use a tighter alliterative line, which forces them to leave out a lot of what's there. And if you would like to read more about those approaches, please read my article in the Barefoot Muse, which you can find if you Google the title Shades of Green, Translators and Gawain. The really innovative aspect of John Ridland's translation is his heptameter line, which gives him enough room to fit in all the detail that's there. And with that, let's get to the story. It has 3 interweaving plot lines, and I really only have time to get you into one of them. So I'll begin by reading excerpts from the book's first section called Christmas at Camelot. We begin with a feast among King Arthur and his knights, and the king has vowed that he will not eat until he has seen a marvel. But now I will say no more about the serving of their feast, for everyone must surely know that none would be left wanting. Another noise, entirely new, was nearing them in a rush, and this indeed would give the king permission to eat his dinner. For scarcely had the ringing trumpet ceased reverberating, and the first course had been served in the court to all in order of rank, when in there burst through the hall door a horrifying figure, the tallest in his stature that ever stalked the earth. From his neck to his midsection, so solid and squarely built, and his loins and limbs of such a length and also such a girth. I wouldn't find it hard to grant he was genuinely half giant. Nevertheless, I must suppose he was actually a man, and quite the best looking of that bulk that ever could ride a horse. For although his body was so broad across the back and breast, Both his belly and his waist were slender, most becomingly, and every part of him in proportion completely followed suit when seen. Men marveled at the hue that stained him with its sheen. Charging into their view, he was, face and all, bright green. There follows much description of the knight and his accoutrements, and much consternation in the court, and words between the king and the intruder, until the knight makes his demand. No, I'm not asking for a fight, I tell you in good faith, for sitting about on these benches, I see only beardless boys. If I were buckled into my armor, mounted on my high steed, there's no man here to match me. Their strength is far too weak. Therefore, all I crave in this court is a little Christmas game, since it is Yule and New Year, and here are some lively lads. If anybody now in this house imagines himself so brave, to be so bold and hot-blooded and so reckless in his head, that he'll dare stoutly strike a stroke and receive one in turn, I shall present him with a gift, this gorgeous long blade axe, this battle axe, one of the heaviest to handle as he likes, and I shall endure the first blow unprotected as I sit. If any man is fierce enough to test what I propose, let him step smartly up to me and snatch hold of this weapon. I'll quit my claim on it forever. Let him keep it as his own. And I will withstand a stroke from him, unflinching on this ground, so long as you grant me the right to deal one in return, to pay him back, yet give him a year, 12 whole months and a day. All right now, quick, let's hear what anyone has to say. If he had astounded them at first, then now they were even stiller. All the liegemen in that hall, the high-born and the lowly, the horseman swiveled in his saddle, turning himself about, and roughly rolling his bloodshot eyes wildly around the court. He arched his bristling eyebrows, which gleamed a vivid green, and pointed back and forth with his beard to see who would stand up. When none would answer him man to man, he cleared his throat too loudly, drew himself up to his full height and lorded it over them thus. What, is this place King Arthur's house? The haughty fellow scoffed, which is continually praised throughout so many realms. Where now is your arrogant pride and all your mighty conquests, your great ferocity and fury and your vainglorious words? Now are the revelry and renown of the famous Round Table overturned with a single speech from one solitary man, for you all cringe in your cowardice without a blow being struck. With this, he laughed at them so loudly their lord was stung to the core. The blood shot suddenly into his fair face and his cheeks from shame and disgrace. He grew angry as the wind, as all did in that place. A king of the bravest kind, he stepped up face to face. But the king need not do anything, for at this point, Gawain steps forward and asks the king's permission to accept the challenge. The Green Knight agrees to this. By God, Sir Gawain, the Green Knight said, it's wholly to my liking that I shall be taking from your hand what I have asked for here. And you have recited without hesitation in precisely correct terms and clear enough all of the covenant I requested of the king, except that you must assure me, sir, and swear it on your oath, that you will seek me out yourself wherever you suppose I may be found on earth, and there receive such a payment as that you deal to me today before this noble court. Where shall I look for you? Gawain asked. Where is your dwelling place? I have no idea where you live, I swear by him who made me. Nor, knight, do I know your court or even your proper name. But direct me faithfully to your house and tell me what you are called, and I shall make use of all my wits to find my way to it. And that, I swear to you, is the truth upon my word of honor. That's quite enough in this new year. No further oath is needed, declared the gigantic man in green to the noble-hearted Gawain. If I can answer your questions truly, after I've taken your tap and you have deftly struck me, then immediately I'll direct you to my house and home, and I will tell you what is my proper name. Then you may call on me and thereby hold yourself to our pact. And if I am unable to speak, then all the better for you. You may linger on in your own land and look for me no further. So don't hold back. Take up your grim tool now, and let's see how it hacks. I'll gladly show you how. And Gawain stroked his axe. The Green Knight promptly prepared himself in position on the floor. He bent his head a little down, uncovering the flesh, and laid his long and lovely locks forward over the crown, leaving his naked neck exposed before the business at hand. Gawain took a grip on his axe and gathered it up high. He braced his left foot on the floor, a little ahead of the right, and swiftly let the heavy axe swing down on the naked neck, so that the sharp edge of the blade sliced into the man's bones and sank clean through the shining flesh, cleaving it in two, until the edge of the burnished steel bit straight into the ground. The handsome head, lopped from the neck, dropped onto the floor, where many kicked at it with their feet as it was rolling about. The blood was spraying out of the body, gleaming over the green. Yet the fellow neither faltered nor fell, none the worse for all of this, but stoutly he sprang forward at once upon his sturdy shanks, and violently he lunged to where the knights stood in their places. He caught hold of his shapely head and quickly lifted it up. And after that, he hurried back to his horse and seized the bridle, stepped up into the steel stirrup, swinging himself astride, and his own head dangling by the hair, he held in his other hand. The rider settled himself securely, as well seated in his saddle as if no mishap had troubled him, although he sat in his place with no head. He twisted his trunk about, that gruesome body that bled. Many were filled with doubt after all his words were said. For now he was holding his head in his hand, upright on his palm, aiming its face directly toward the nobles on the dais. And then it lifted its eyelids up and stared with wide open eyes, and out of its mouth it spoke to them in words you now may hear. Look to it, Gawain, that you are ready to go as you have pledged, and seek me faithfully, my man, in the hearing of all these knights. Make your way to the Green Chapel, I charge you to receive a stroke just like the one you've struck, as you'll have well deserved. It will promptly be repaid to you upon New Year's Day in the morning. Many people know me as the Knight of the Green Chapel, and so you will never fail to find me if you seek me out. Therefore come, or you'll deserve to be called a craven coward. With a violent yanking on the reins, he turned his horse around and hurtled out the hall door, holding his head in his hand, so fast that the fire flew from the flints struck by the horse's hooves. Then, to what country he returned, nobody there knew, any more than they could know what place he had come to them from. What then? The king and Gawain shared a laugh at him, a grim, yet openly they declared it a wonder among men. Here's a spoiler alert. Gawain does not end up beheaded, although in the process, he undergoes some very interesting adventures with a lady who insists on invading into his bedroom, and some further interesting adventures with the lady's husband, who has forced Gawain into a friendly bargain. Gawain and his host will exchange whatever they get during each of 3 days. The host while he is out hunting, and Gawain while he's being entertained by his host's wife. How he keeps his bargain or doesn't, while observing all the requirements of courtly love and Christian honor, all make for an intricate and colorful story and a book you will want to read. Thank you all for
Thank
being
you.
here.
Very nicely read too, Maryann. Thank you. Wow, that brings back memories of graduate school in Gawain. We are all muted still, and I believe now also reading from John Ridland's work will be Sally Thomas. Sally, can you unmute yourself?
I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
I can indeed.
Great, perfect. Well, thanks to Maryann for that overall introduction to the Gawain poet, who is also believed to be the Pearl poet. And that was a rollicking good reading. And Pearl offers a really fascinatingly different part of that same poet's range and register. It's a completely different kind of poem, and it's just fascinating that these very different things spring from this same source. Pearl is a vision or a dream poem, which is of course a common trope in medieval poetry, in which a person falls asleep and essentially their sleep and waking form the frame for the story that the poem really wants to tell. And in this case, the essential narrative of Pearl, although, I mean, there could be any number of sort of allegorical overlays or resonances to this basic narrative, is that the narrator, the dreamer, has sustained a loss or a bereavement. I mean, he speaks at the beginning of the poem about losing a pearl in the ground. And it's fairly quickly understood that he's talking about a death, and the death of a very young child close to him, possibly is his own child. So he speaks of the loss of this pearl. He goes to the garden where he says that he has lost the pearl, and there falls asleep, as one does, worn out with grief, and enters into this dream or vision country, which you quickly realize is a vision of heaven which he describes at great length through many stanzas, all of its beauties. And there's a river running through it. He's standing on one side of the river, and on the other side of the river, he sees this beautiful young woman whom he recognizes as his lost pearl, even though she's completely translated in her appearance. So he enters into a dialogue with her, and the whole kind of gist of the conversation is that he is trying to reconcile what he's seeing with things that he knows about this person, and you know, basically to figure out who she has become in heaven. What is death and the translation into heaven do to you? What is this, you know, what does this mean? She appears as a queen. This intrigues him. So they enter into this back and forth where, you know, among other things, he says, well, you know, if you're a queen in heaven, does that mean that you're Mary? And she says, oh, no, we're all queens, but she's really the queen. Then he says, but you were a child. You really shouldn't be a queen in heaven. You know, you haven't lived long enough to deserve this status. You should be a countess or maybe even a lesser lady. And this prompts her to respond with a retelling of the biblical parable of the laborers in the vineyard. Maybe she's a latecomer, but they all get the same wages. And then a long disquisition on baptism and the way that in Catholic doctrine, baptism is understood to remove original sin, so that if you're a very young person and you're baptized and you haven't actually lived long enough to commit any sin, then you're sort of ahead in the game when you get to heaven. So they're all queens. She ultimately takes him up the river to a place where he can see into the heavenly Jerusalem, where he participates in a vision that's taken very much from the book of Revelation. In fact, there's a whole refrain about, you know, there's this in the heavenly city, there's that in the heavenly city, as we know it from the Apostle John. You know, this keeps being repeated. So he finally witnesses the marriage feast of the Lamb and in heaven, and is so overcome by a desire to join in this celebration that he leaps into the river. And that's the moment when he awakens from the dream and is then re-enters his own world transformed by that dream. So I've chosen selections from several different parts of the poem. The beginning with the exposition setting up the loss of the pearl, the middle in which he encounters this glorified pearl and enters into dialogue with her, and especially her answers to him. And in the end, the final scene of the procession of the brides of the Lamb and the wedding feast of the Lamb, and then the end of the poem. It was difficult to choose sections because really I just wanted to read it all. Maryann, in her preface to, or her foreword to John Ridland's translation, begins with the word dazzling as her first impression on reading Pearl in Middle English. And what I really hope that you can hear as I read is the dazzling surface of this translation and the way that he's taken this difficult music and made it beautiful. I mean, obviously intelligible to the average reader, but also just beautiful and dazzling in its own right. And again, more than anything else, that's what I hope you can hear. So I'm going to begin with section 1, stanza 1, and continue from there. Pearl that would please a prince's eyes, in a bright gold setting, radiant, I never met such a precious prize among all those out of Orient. So round, so right in any display, So smooth, so slender her sides in my mind. Whenever I judge fair gems, I say I set her off as one of a kind. In a garden of herbs, I lost her and mourn. She dropped from me through the grass to that plot. By love's loss, I'm stricken and grief torn for my hidden pearl without a spot. 2. Since in that spot it sprang from me, I've often watched and wished for its wealth that used to keep me sorrow-free and raise my spirits and mend my health. It wrings my heart with such great force, my breast both swells and seethes with grief. Yet I thought I'd never from any source heard songs so sweet steal to my relief. And many hushed songs have stolen my way, to think of her color so clad in a clod. You spoil a splendid jewel in your clay, O earth, my own pearl without a spot. 3. That spot of spice is bound to spread where such rich rotting has begun. Blossoms of white and blue and red shine sheerly bright beneath the sun. Flower and fruit won't be denied, where the pearl drove down into that dark loam. For each plant sprouts from seeds that have died, or wheat won't flourish from harvest home. Each good begins from another good thing. Such a lovely seed fulfills its lot. So the burgeoning spices too should spring from that precious pearl without a spot. 4. In that spot I speak of, as you may hear, I entered into the herbal green in August at that high time of year when corn is cut with scythes made keen, where the pearl had gone rolling down the mound. These bright and beautiful plants cast shadows. There gillyflower, ginger, and gromwell abound, and peonies powdered as in a meadow. If it was beautiful to perceive, yet a fairer fragrance came floating out. For there that priceless one lives, I believe, my precious pearl without a spot. So I wanted to read those 4 stanzas kind of contiguously so that you can hear the way that each section has a refrain that not only repeats at the end of each stanza, but some motif from that refrain picks up with the first line of the next stanza. And this is something that carries over even from section to section. So the whole thing is like this crown of sonic crowns. It's just, it's just stunning. So, but I am going to fast forward. So he falls asleep, he begins to dream, and to be given a vision that I've already described in this dream. So here's a little of the description of the place where he finds himself. And again, this goes on and on and on and on beautifully, but I'll just give you a little snippet of that. So we're in section 2, stanza 6. With that awakening, my spirit, or falling asleep, with that, my spirit sprang from that spot. My body lay dreaming on the mound. My soul had soared by the grace of God, questing where marvels could be found. I'd no idea where I was, what place, but I knew I'd been cast where cliffs clove the sky. Toward a forest I turned my face, where resplendent rocks I could descry. None would believe the light they shed, their gleaming, glorious radiance, for never in tapestries men have made were half such splendid ornaments. So again, the really salient detail in all of this is that there's a river and he's on one side of the river, which is going to become important. So fast forwarding again into the 3rd section where he's going to catch his first glimpse of Pearl. So this is stanza 14. A greater marvel subdued my sense. I saw beyond that sparkling run, a crystal cliff stood in full resplendence. Royal rays rose from it to the sun. A young girl stood at the foot of it, quite a gentle maiden of courteous air. Her mantle was a gleaming white. I knew her well. I'd seen her elsewhere, like gleaming gold sliced to threads of hair. That fair one shone from across the shore. For a long time, I looked upon her there. The longer I knew her more and more. And I just love that moment where, I mean, she is completely translated from this tiny child who's died, and yet he's having that experience of, I know I've seen you somewhere. And it dawns on him who she is. So they enter into dialogue. Again, he marvels at having found her, though he struggles to understand who and what she has become. If she's a queen, is she the queen of heaven? Do you turn into the Blessed Virgin Mary when you die? What, you know? So he's asking her about this. And the next stanza that I'm going to read is her response to that question, where she explains the whole queen deal in heaven. So we're fast forwarding now to stanza 38. And this is Pearl speaking. In the court of the kingdom of God alive, all have property special to them. Each of the people, when they arrive, is made queen or king of all the realm. Yet none deposes another, for each one is glad for what others receive and wishes their crowns were 5 times more, if that were possible to achieve. But my lady who bore as a baby, Jesus, her dominion above us is measureless, and that makes none of our company jealous, for she is the queen of courteousness. So again, his response is, well, this really all seems too courteous, because somebody as young and untried in virtue as you should be only a countess or even a lady of lesser station. And this is where they enter into the workers in the vineyard and then baptism. And it's a long back and forth. She notes that she's not only a queen, although she's not the queen, because that's Mary, but she's also a bride, which is another, they have a back and forth about, well, how did he pick you out of all the millions of people? And she says, oh, no, we're all brides. One of a company of 144,000, which is the biblical number in the book of Revelation, who continually celebrate the marriage feast of Christ the Lamb in the heavenly city. So at this point he says, well, first of all, he talks about how such a city must be spotless and beautiful and perfect to contain somebody as perfect as she is. But looking around, he doesn't see any buildings. So where is this city? And she says, well, if you'll follow me upriver, I'll take you there and I'll show you this heavenly city. So the vision that he's having culminates in, again, a fairly lengthy and extremely detailed vision of the city itself and the continual feast of worship that goes on there. And I am going to skip a lot of that description and go to the procession of brides that he sees going, that this is a wedding feast, the wedding feast of the Lamb. Stanza 92. Just as the powerful moon can rise before the day's gleam fades away, so suddenly, in a wondrous surprise, I saw a procession in full array. This noble city of famous name was suddenly full with no summons call of identical virgins dressed all the same as my blissful one with her crown, and all were crowned like her in the same fashion, adorned in pearls and clothes of white. On each one's breast was finely fastened the blissful pearl with great delight. 93. With great delight, they glided together on golden streets that glinted like glass. 100,000, I think, were gathered, and their matching liveries made one mass. Who was the gladdest would be hard to tell. The Lamb before them did proudly pass, with red gold horns visible like precious pearls his clothing was. Toward the throne they took their way, though many they didn't crowd in tight, but mild as maids gone to mass to pray, they all drew forward with great delight. 94. The delight his coming brought would be too much to describe, it was so great. The elders, when he approached, I could see, fell face down worshiping at his feet. Legions of angels assembled their scattered, sweet-smelling incense together. Then newly glory and glee again were uttered. All sang to praise that splendid jewel. The sound might strike through the earth to hell, that the heavenly virtues sing in their joy. To laud the Lamb with his throngs as well, I conceived a great delight to join. So it's at this point that he throws himself into the river, and he's had this epiphany. The whole time he has thought that the thing that he's longed for and mourned and lost is this child, his pearl. And, you know, of course, heaven in this vision is completely full of pearls, and she's wearing pearls from head to foot, and they're all wearing pearls. But it's kind of interesting that that has gotten transferred onto the Lamb himself, that he is the jewel. And so this is this important epiphany upon which he awakens and is at first feels a sense of exile from that vision. But he's been changed by it because he's realized what it is that he's actually longing for. And that, you know, he's thought it was pearl. In fact, it's Christ himself, the Lamb. And he realizes that, you know, even though he wants to see him again in that heavenly city, that the Lamb is actually with him in this world too. So the concluding stanza goes like this, and it's, I don't know, I just like this note that he ends on, and the way that he describes what he now feels that God is to him. So 101. To please the Prince with what is right is easy enough for the Christian to do, for I have found him both day and night, a God, a Lord, and a fine friend too. This happened to me as I lay on this sod, prostrate with grief that my pearl was gone, which afterward I committed to God in Christ's dear blessing and my own. He in the form of bread and wine, the priest shows us daily in full measure. Lord, grant us to be humble servants of thine and precious pearls unto thine own pleasure. Amen. Amen. And again, I could have read the whole poem. It's incredibly fun to read aloud. It was incredibly fun to read to myself. I just think this is a titanic achievement, and its music is beautiful. So thank you.
That was very, very nicely read, Sally. Makes me want to go back. Thank you. And we're still under the dispensation of being all muted, except for now, Mrs. Ridland, Muriel Ridland. Will you please unmute yourself and speak of whatever you wish to speak of? Give us some feeling or background about John Ridland and his translations and so forth.
Thank you. And thank you for those readings, Maryann and Jan. They were beautiful. And I realized, perhaps for the first time, how extraordinarily beautiful the pearl is when, as you were reading it, the sound. Where the Gawain is a poem that both my husband and I loved from early days in graduate school, and he longed to translate it. He started translating from Hungarian, which was from one language to another, unlike Middle English to contemporary English. And he was very systematic with that, typing out words, meanings. Hungarian is an impossible language, so it's not an Indo-European language. And that gave him good practice, I think, in being very disciplined in translating. But he worked very hard at both the Pearl and the Gawain, and he would come out to me where I would be in the middle of the house from his study with such delight and such triumph over solving problems in both of those translations. And he really worked at figuring out a stanza form for the Pearl, a rhyming system that would be complementary anyway, complementary to the original. I think that he also collaborated, has always collaborated in his translations with other people. And the Hungarian he had to, because he had to be with a native speaker since it's such a difficult language. But he collaborated with Maryann Corbett. Well, first of all, with Mary Vesey, who died before he finished the Gawain, who turned up from her magazine Sticks in Alabama. That's how they met. And she was extraordinarily exacting that every word that was in the original must be translated into his version. And then Maryann and he worked back and forth on the translations to get the language right. And he worked on the verse form, which he invented. The 14ers, he didn't think that there was any point in trying to use the alliterative poetry form. And it's been something that I think was very special, this collaboration back and forth, first written, handwritten, and then, of course, by computer, not by mail, snail mail. I think that his modus operandi was always to write a lot and get things down on paper and then transfer them to the computer and go from there. But he really loved both of these works, and you can see that they are lovable. He particularly liked the part that Maryann read. The beginning is so striking, this huge giant coming into the house, and the book, as she showed you, which has, I don't think you can see it, the illustrations are from part of the family, my daughter's partner, from the computer. And the pearl, of course, is the original manuscript's illustration, which is gaudy and not terribly well drawn, but absolutely delightful. I am very sorry that he couldn't be here today. Naturally, we've lost a lot. And I don't know if you would like me to read a couple of his own poems, or whether
Please
you would
do.
like to stop.
Please do. Please do.
Okay. Well, he wrote very serious poetry, always with a slightly funny, through humor. And I think I'll read his poem on fame, and then I'll read a serious one. Fame, the day I woke up famous, won the Nobel like Seamus from Haney, the Pulitzer like Scott the Kiowa from Hamus. They're equal, like it or not, was a cold day in hell. I did not take it well. I shivered in my bed among the ungrateful dead. I tossed myself awake, walked down to catch the break, rip, curl, and hustle back of surf along the shore. I knew that there'd be more. A storm was on its way, though difficult to say just when it would arrive. Meanwhile, I was alive, though dead already, so to speak. Fame hurt me, though. It hurt me, though it helped. My hardy lapdog yelped, sniffing the sudden swarm of newsmen. There the storm encircling the house. In German, I shout, aus, but they won't go away. I guess they're camped to stay. Well, this to greet the day, prepare myself to say in Stockholm what I must. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Fame's not to trust, but crown me if you must. What I noticed as I read his more recent poetry was how often he used couplets. But there are other poems where the rhyme forms are patterns are very unusual, even hidden. He was an unobtrusive rhymer, but because he liked rhyme, the pearl was something that he could do well, I think. I think that I will read one poem that maybe connects with the dream in the pearl. It's tomorrow. We lost a child. A second time it comes, that stubborn dream. He walks not to me, not away, out through long, dark green grass, half tottering, half lame, but happy in an ordinary thing his waking never did, can never do. And now I wake into the normal sun which sets the dry grass mountainside aflame. We were in Boulder at the time, that's Flagstaff Mountain. Out through the window where the mule deer feed, not weeping, not exulting, nearly dumb before the snow falls easily like seed. And then just a couple of little ones. Age looking back at its youth. We had so little, yet we had so much. Thunder and lightning at the lightest touch. This was published on the internet by Steve Denning at typepad.com as the most beautiful two-line poem in the world, which was a bit startling, but nice. And then a final one. Old fool on an early walk, to see the busy sun lacquer the dusted lake is better to have done than lying wild awake. And I think I'll leave it at that, but I know how much work there is in any translation and how at the same time it takes the poetic talent to render it in such a way that it is still true to the original and yet accessible to us and beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was lovely, and it was nice to hear about those aspects of the way he translated and so forth. I have a friend, if I can throw in a personal note, who claims that translation is much, much easier for verse than writing your own original poetry. And I have had the devil's time trying to explain to him it's 3 times as hard. Thank you very much. I have to ask Karina at this point, may I unmute all and open up for question and answers? Is Karina there?
Yes, I'm here. Yes, and absolutely, you can unmute everyone, and everyone, please feel free to ask your questions and talk with the.
Okay, I think I have done the right thing, but I may have done the wrong thing.
You can't unmute all, but you can ask everyone to unmute.
There, okay, that'll do just fine. It's too bad you can't unmute the way you can mute all. Everyone, please feel free to open up, and questions for any of the translators, readers, anybody. It was a wonderful experience, so we must have questions. Don't be shy.
Rena, shy?
I would just like to say to Muriel that it's a real joy to see her again.
Oh, Rena, I'm so glad that you appeared. I was so relieved.
Wonderful to see you. You know, I have a copy of that Green Knight and also of the Pearl, and they are among my treasures.
Do I detect some shyness out there in participant land? Please feel free to ask questions of anybody, any reader, any poet, translator.
Well, I want to answer what you said, Len, that you have a friend who says that translation is easier than writing your own original work. And I think that in a way it is, because you don't have to count on personal feelings. You're not digging into your own thoughts or your own feelings. You are borrowing somebody else's. And that means that you can do it intellectually. Poetry really can't be done entirely intellectually. There has to be that other thing that is very hard to get to. But if you're working with someone else's, you can, I don't know, you can be more objective in a way.
I was thinking
And-
primarily of technical difficulty, how to deal with an extremely complex, say a Petrarch canzone with incredibly complex rhyme scheme and meter and the changes and so forth. Try doing that and make sure you hit all of the same rhymes, for example.
Well, that of course is the joy of it. That's what makes it play rather than work. It's so playful. You find yourself enjoying it, and then you get around to the feeling in the poem, and you say, "Why am I feeling like dancing when this is about heartbreak?" But that's just the way it is. I loved translating St. John of the Cross because he has those very elaborate rhymes too, and elaborate schemes, and his imagery, everything about St. John of the Cross is complex, and that's why he's so much fun.
I do think to have an accurate translation, you do need to understand what the writer's emotion is in order to accurately portray that. So it might not be your own emotions, you don't get to choose those, but you definitely have to really be intimate with the original work and the original author to make sure that you translate it as objectively as you can. So
And you have to keep your own, and you have to keep your own self out too. You have to keep, stay out of it. Yeah.
Which is hard sometimes when you're working so closely with something. I'm sure that maybe you guys can attest to this, but is it difficult to keep your own emotions and your own opinions separate from your translation work?
I find that I have to try hard to be like glass, clear glass.
Mm-hmm.
I assume that question was addressed to everyone, so let's everyone take a crack at it. No one wants to jump in.
I would like to jump in. Am I allowed?
Yes, go ahead, Jay.
We need some jumpers right now.
Yes, jump in.
Jump in.
Thank you so much. I come from a very different tradition. I speak Russian, and I translate professionally and for the love of my heart. I've translated the Spada, Martin Spada, and thank you. I'm still trying to get him published in Russian because I translated his collection, and that was a while. I studied with him in 2010 in Montreal, and I translated Singer from English into Russian, and I translate back and forth in 2 languages, and I speak some Ukrainian as well. I write in 2 languages, and I find that Russian poetic tradition is so different than American. And being steeped in Russian poetry, I find that to translate someone from the Western world, especially from Yambic, from English, is so different because Russian language rhymes so easily. The free verse is very much a Western freedom, I should say. And the Russian thought and Russian literature is very much structured by its language. And because I'm a language professional, basically, I feel that when you live in 2 different worlds, to understand the poetry and to live in someone's head, coming from a different tradition, it's as painfully difficult as write your own stuff. That was my experience, and I very much apologize if I am contradicting anyone who is done so much more than I am. I apologize.
No need. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think the difficulty is different. it's what Len said, that the difficulty in translating is the technical stuff, is finding the right meter, finding the right sound. I was talking about the emotional aspect of it. So we're in agreement.
Oh, okay, I'll jump in here. My work with Petrarch is how I think about it is Emerson's way of saying that you need to find a meter making argument. So what I'm doing, I am really trying to go as far into what Petrarch was thinking, seeing. That's the whole thing with the, having to be able to see the clothes of the women. It's not some kind of false compare that he's doing. He has a very visual imagination. And when he sees, this newfangled costume with the open surcoat, and here's this thing, and it looks like, gosh, she is an angel. She's sprouting wings. If this was the metamorphoses, we could watch the wings continue to grow. And of course they finally do, and she dies and he talks to her in heaven, which is a whole different set of conversations than the Pearl. Although I think Petrarch probably did read Pearl or know of it by some other means. But this thing about the meter making argument is that I have to know, and of course he is all about arguing. These are these little rational things, and he has an image, and then he does the John Donne kind, what John Donne learned from him and the other ones. So I have to have this argument, but what music does this argument make in English? So that we can, I think the move with Petrarch has been to have the beautiful surface and to have the beautiful music. And yet in English, I find something that is not quite so lovely and fluffy. And so I'm really looking for what is that argument and what music does it make in English? And that seems more helpful to me.
I was just checking. Lee, what do you think
Yes.
of David Young and of Muse and Darlings?
Okay, Derling is the go-to guy. He is
He's very literal.
Yes, but let's see, I think Mike Juster said one time that he is the most reliable. He used the word trot, but I only use that word with great affection for Derling because he's trustworthy in a way that I'm probably not. But I can look at him, and Musa is a fabulous scholar. His notes are more fun than his translations, and you can count on them. His scholarship is very good.
And Young?
But Young, my goal in life is for you and for me and for Mike Juster to put the final nail in the coffin of free verse is going to free you from the tyranny of rhyme. If I hear the word tyranny of rhyme one more time,
I get it.
Yeah.
You're preaching to the choirs here.
Well, that's my point, is that if we can have not just one, but 3 different translations of this thing, showing that it can be done with some kind of attention to the form, that this will stop, or at least we will have had our say as well and a chance to do that. But David Young, it's wonderful. It's good to read. I have 19 different translations that I'm at this tough place. I will read every one of them. And if it's a really hard one, there will be 3 or 4 different camps of how you can do this. Hey, nobody else knows. Why shouldn't I have my own interpretation? What an idea. An interpretation.
I'm familiar with the process, believe me.
Well, yeah, but you
Doesn't
asked
work.
me.
Familiar with what you're saying. I know what you mean.
All right.
Yeah.
Karina, are we missing other people or what's happening here?
It's Al.
Yeah, may I jump in?
Oh, we have somebody else. Hey.
Well, I'm in an unusual position because I haven't really done much translation in the last 50 years. I did some from Ilko when I was in college. What I have done some occasions is make forming versions of chord file based songs. And in order to talking technical difficulties, you have to you also have to.
You have an echo. Can you turn down your speaker?
I don't have a speaker on headphones.
Well, okay, it's an echo, but
We're getting a
No,
lot
I
of static in there, Al.
I don't know what to say.
okay.
Well, how about if I talk more quietly? Will that help?
Or
Maybe I'm
try
over.
to take off if you take off your headphones and use just your computer speaker, it might help.
It's soft that I won't hear clearly enough what people are saying.
Okay.
So I can. Anyway, I wanted to really build thing that Rena said about making yourself transparent emotionally, because on those occasions when I've tried to put a song from, in this case, German into English, I have to be emotionally transparent, except, and maybe Rena can speak to this, except on those occasions where I'm familiar with the emotion that's there in the song, where the singer of the song expressing an emotion with which I'm familiar. In that case, I don't have to be much as an actor would. I can draw on my emotional resources to try to bring out a parallel to the emotional content of the lyric of the song when I bring it from another language into English. Rena, does that make sense to you?
Well, certainly it makes sense to you because we're all different and we do everything differently. We write differently and we translate differently also. But I think the thing that I do is not to judge the feeling by itself. I don't have to share the feeling. I don't have to be in love with Laura in order to make a good translation of somebody who is. You can imagine yourself in someone else's emotional shoes. As a matter of fact, I am not a religious person, but my favorite poems are religious poems. Because what works for me is if the person who wrote the poem really means it, and that comes through. If it's genuine, if the feeling in the poem is genuine, I can borrow it. And while I'm reading it or writing it, I mean it. I don't have to be in agreement. What I have to do is make the music work, because I work through my ears. I think through my ears. And if something makes the same music, that will do it for me. I don't have to borrow anything else. I just imagine myself in the other shoes.
What we're saying complimentary, Rena.
And it's the same with the metaphysical poets whom I've also translated. People like George Herbert, for instance. I adore George Herbert. And I understand why I do, because I can understand his feeling. I can walk into his head and feel it, but it's not mine. And the reason that I like that it's someone else's, that I respect that feeling and I report it the way he feels it, not the way I feel it. As a matter of fact, I wanted to talk about something else. When Len, I think it was Len, someone said something about not translating in rhyme and meter when the original is in rhyme and meter. I think that's criminal. I really do. I think that it takes away half of the value of the poem. Because if the music is gone, whatever is left is impoverished. And I remember reading something in an introduction to a book of translations by Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz, who is one of my loves in life. And she does everything through the ear. She rhymes and she sings and she taps the drum. She does everything she has to do to make the feeling worth more than to somebody else it might be. But this particular translator, who is a magnificent prose translator and has done some of the best Don Quixote in the world, some of the best everything in the world, but she says that she didn't bother with translating with rhyme and meter because she felt that it would keep her from being totally truthful to the poem. And I just, it hurt. It hurt physically to see Sor Juana without rhyme and meter. It's as if she had been sent out on stage naked.
Why you need the meter and why you need the rhyme is pretty obvious when you read a prose paraphrase of a literal sense. That kind of person who translates tends to say things like, slide over to a city in Western New York. But a poet says, shuffle off to Buffalo. You've got to have that. Without the sound and the music, it's lost.
It's just wrong. It's just wrong. And it's less fun too.
I think we saw a picture of Jan Hodges' chair a moment ago, but no Jan.
Oh, here's Jan.
I'm here.
He's
that was wonderful. That reading was wonderful. I loved it.
That was great.
Well, I have thousands of things I could ask or say, but I think I'm pretty much at the point where I have exhausted our participants. Have I?
Somebody should say something about imagery. I mean, we've been talking about the mechanics, about rhyme and meter, the things that have to be counted and numbered. But how's about that other thing that doesn't have to be counted, that just happens in your head like magic?
Well, certainly there's so much that's visual in the Gawain that the descriptions, the rich and detailed descriptions of everything the Green Knight was wearing, things, and then the amazing descriptions of the hunts. You could obviously, I remember John saying he was sure that he could go out and successfully hunt according and cut up the meat afterwards according to the descriptions in that part of the poem. And then the wonderfully funny, slyly funny scenes of the seduction where the lady comes into the bedroom and it's a four-poster bed, one presumes, with curtains all around it, and enters through the curtains and sits on the bedside. And you're imagining this, and if you realize that in the Middle Ages, they didn't have pajamas, they couldn't go down to Kmart and get something to put on at night. So he is trapped when she sits on the side of the bed. He can't get out. And he has to listen to her blandishments and her courtly love appeals. I think all of this is very visual. And the Green Knight himself, and then at the end where there's the little chapel, which turns out to be just a little grassy mound, all of this is extremely visual. And that's part of the charm of that poem. Yeah. It's also true, of course, of Pearl. And I think that most of John's poems have something visual in them. So I hope that satisfies you, Rena, because it's not just true.
Visual. John had a lot of auditory stuff and a lot of feeling, a lot of tactile stuff. All five senses, he managed to get to all five senses. I miss him to this day. I loved his letters.
Thank you. I miss his letters too.
I'm sure you do.
Well, I don't know what to say at this point, which is not usually the way people would describe me. Alex, Karina, anybody?
Well,
if there,
if there's nothing else, then nobody else has, then you have the right to end the proceedings, I suppose.
That's right. Make me feel like an executioner. I really appreciate it.
Could we talk about how to teach other people to translate? Because I've been trying that. And that's interesting too. And that's a lot of fun also. And I've discovered that there are mechanical things you can do that actually work. For example, if you have a poem and it rhymes and it has meter and so forth, what I like to do, and I just discovered this because I was making all the mistakes. I was doing everything wrong, trying to think like the poet, and you can't do that. What I've done is trying to get into the context. What do these two lines that have to rhyme, what do they have in common? What context do they have in common from which I can steal the rhymes? Because if you're working within one context, maybe there are words in there that, since they belong to the same family of thought, the same family of ideas, maybe they will get to rhyme to each other. So what I've done is to get pictures of the poem and then make balloons. And in the balloons, I put in possible rhyme words. And it makes it much easier because you don't have to do it entirely in your head. You have it in the balloons there. That, you know, if something is about medicine, you can say, for example, sick, and it'll rhyme with trick, or with something else that belongs in the same family of ideas. And it is so much fun. And it's fun to pass it on to someone else. How do you do it, Len?
Well, almost exactly the same. I'm going through, as I mentioned earlier, some Petrarch, and my Italian is minimal, but I've been for the past year basically teaching myself Italian, at least sight reading. And when you come across something that's, say, a couplet and the rhyme, and the word in Italian is umbrella, and the rhyme is with, I'm making this up, of course, and the rhyme is with bicycle chain, you have a hell of a problem on your hands in English, because now you've got to think of something that, as you say, pulls from the worlds of bicycle chains and from umbrellas, and somehow or other gives you two words that are separate from those that come back together. What, Maryann?
Len.
Yeah, what?
Len?
Hello?
Hello. Wait a minute. Is someone else trying to speak and I'm running over them? Okay.
Maryann tried to come in, or?
Maryann?
Were you there, Maryann?
No, she's speaking to someone else.
Oh.
Okay. Okay. Anyway, what I was going to say to you, have you been working on have you done anything on the end of the canzoniere?
I'm up to poem 276, I think.
Oh, you are going to have such a good time.
Well, let me rephrase that. I saw that there were huge, long poems early that I knew that would be like mountains to climb. So what I did was I raced ahead and did some of those that are near the end, the extremely long ones, and went back and did all the long poems, then went back to the beginning and started to do all the sonnets and the sestinas. And having done that, I now have nothing but sonnets left in front of me to get to the end. So
okay, I felt better. I felt better about doing all the sonnets first, and I'm gonna do the canzones next. After
I save dessert for last always. It's my reward.
I always read the end first, but anyway, there is one poem that I just dealt with in the section that Roche identifies with Lent, the poems at the end that of the speaker's life. And one of them, it is utterly and completely necessary that I should either rhyme with purple, because it's talking about Tyrian purple, that very expensive, that isn't even purple at all.
Yeah.
So I'm doing, I might get away with herbal, I might get away with verbal, but purple, you know, it's the oranges problem. But it was essential that I do what Rena said and say, where else can I go here? And then do more research. And is this word over here, is there some kind of thing in the thesaurus that, and all of a sudden, that's it. You know, when I have a way in, that's, but finding those rhymes that will do that thing and match what the original text says.
I think all three of us.
We're all talking about the same thing.
You've got to fill those balloons. That's it. The more reasonable stuff you get into the balloons, the more you're going to be able to do. And also you fiddle with the syntax. Because if the impossible word is at the end of the line, you can bury it in the middle of the line and put something else at the end. You have to play with grammar, play with syntax, not play with the meaning. That is sacred. You have to mean the same thing. You can't put your own thought in there, but you can fiddle with the way things fit into the box. Translating is like sticking things into a drawer. You know, you have to place it in the drawer, and it's not that because the poet put the socks in with the handkerchiefs, you don't have to. You can put the socks in another drawer, another line.
Break the bones of the syntax. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Break the bones of the grammar. Do what you must do.
Do what you have to do.
That's done.
But do not kill the music.
No.
Remember David Berman, what he used to say, Raina?
Right.
He said in a translating of a poem, he said, you've got a lot of mistakes you can make and a lot of good things you can do, but whatever you do, don't harm the English translation. Make it a beautiful poem.
Make it a beautiful poem, right? And the other thing that I told students, because it's a source of despair to me, and I know that this is so now, that no matter how much you try, you're going to lose something.
Mm-hmm.
There is no way to avoid losing something. The whole trick to translation is to be very patient, very humble, very prepared for disaster, because sometimes the favorite thing in that line is the one that you're going to lose, but you can't avoid it. I had to do with Robert Frost, for instance. Oh, what is that 8-line thing? One of his poems, anyway. I had to give it 10 lines in Spanish, and I spent weeks trying to shrivel it down. You know, to somehow do more with less language. Couldn't do it. Had to give it 10 lines. But that's better than losing the music or losing the meaning, of course.
Right.
So you're going to lose something.
That's why we need all the different versions of really important poets. Every single thing I read, every translation, this translation is good for oddball stuff. Anna Maria Army. Every once in a while, I'll just be like this. Oh, what'd she do? And but sometimes her music and her poetry is not what I do.
No.
So every single translator has some insight that when we can learn all this will give us an aggregate better picture, I think. And that's why we need all three of us doing this. Yeah,
we need everybody. We need every.
No, I was talking about the Petrarch crowd right now.
Oh, the Petrarch.
The Petrarch crowd right now. Yeah, three. Petrarch.
I've been translating people into Spanish. People that I love, like Richard Wilbur, for instance, who doesn't. And I wanted to translate it into Spanish, and not lose the kind of fluidity, the fluency with which he does things. It sounds like nothing he does sounds like a drum. Everything sounds like water growing over stones. And I wanted to catch that and not lose that gentleness, that tenderness, which is there in the person too.
Rena, have you done a Black November Turkey by Wilbur?
No, I didn't get to that one. I only
Okay.
did 42 of his poems. My book contains 42 of his poems, the best, but that one has to be rough.
It has subtle embedded puns that are so striking you don't realize they're puns until you've read it 12 times.
I know it.
I wonder, that must be a torture in Spanish.
Oh, punning is just it's impossible.
Yeah.
Oh,
You have
no,
to
it's
come up
not.
with, you have to come, well, it's not. You have to come up with a pun in the other language that says the same thing, that means the same thing, that adds, but that's a loss too. It's a loss.
Well, I see the little hand has gotten, no. Looking at 5:07 here on the clock. We could go on like this,
You
for another
remember
5
that
or
I
6 hours.
translated your, what's her name, Truella?
Susie Truella, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you translated something of mine and didn't miss anything.
Well, thank you. They're very kind.
Yeah.
And I keep trying to stop from sounding like I'm trying to hustle us all off, but it is getting a little long. Alex, Karina, tell me what to do. I'm at a loss here.
Vivian?
We have Vivian.
And, okay, any more questions? I suppose that's
Yes, you
okay.
have one here, Vivian Chisholm.
Go ahead.
Hello,
Yes.
from New Zealand. Are you receiving me?
Yes.
Yes.
You're unmuted.
I'm joining
Lot
you
of
this
echo.
morning, Sunday morning in New Zealand. I'm a niece of John and Maryann Ridland, and I just wanted to thank the readers and the writers for a wonderful morning here in New Zealand, and send my warm greetings to my Ridland family, whom I can see on the header at the top. And thank you very much for having me in this circle this morning.
You're very welcome.
That's
We're
lovely.
glad to have you.
Wonderful to have New Zealand in the crowd.
Yeah.
Yes, can I speak?
Yeah.
Thank you, Viv. We're so pleased to have you, and I'm very glad you joined and made this a bit more international. My daughter and granddaughter in England, so this was spread around quite a bit. Thank you, all my family, for listening, for joining in. Thank you for all the readers and all the discussion. But my son and I are heading off now for lunch, and I can see that Karina needs lunch. And thank you, Karina, too, for being so efficient and helpful.
Oh, that was smooth. That
Wonderful.
was very smooth.
Very smooth.
She needs lunch. Yes.
Well, I'd like to say before Karina gets to lunch that this was delightful, and that we should thank Zoom. I think when I heard about Zoom, I said, "Oh, this is poison. This is going to kill Western civilization. This is the end." But it's been very good, because I have a group. It's not mine, but I'm one of the founders, and they started out as Dominicans. That's what I am. I'm from the Dominican Republic. And we stretched out to Cuba and to Puerto Rico and to Venezuela. And now we are in Argentina. There are people in Argentina and in Mexico and in Colombia and so on who are coming to our weekly meetings, and they wouldn't miss it for anything. And this would never have happened without Zoom. It's really enriched. It's really enriched the feeling of people toward poetry, that it belongs to everybody and that we can all share it. I love that.
Yes, thank you, Muriel. You will let you go. Enjoy your lunch.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I want to say
Goodbye, family and friends, and thank you for the enlightenment of the readings from Maryann and Sally, and thank you, Alex, for publishing both of those books.
Amen.
They are a delight to have in a published form altogether, and of course also I thank anybody who ever helped John. That's Maryann, and unfortunately the late Mary Vesey, but they are great adventures, and I hope everybody will enjoy both Gawain and the Pearl in those translations, because I think they're very good.
They are.
They are.
Yes.
Thank
And
you.
thank you,
Bye.
everybody.
Goodbye to all.
Bye.
And I
Great.
should
In
add
your
that
hands.
I'll try to
Thank you,
have a
Alex.
recording for this session in a day or so. And also invite you all to go to Able Muse because we have a new issue. And Rena is our featured poet. I'm sure you'd like to see some of her new.
Yes.
Here, here.
Dying to see it.
So it's easy. Go to ablemuse.com and take it from there.
And before
We
you
know
leave,
the way.
Thank you.
Rena, I tried to contact you multiple times via email, but I never got a response. And it sounds like you never got my email. So we
I
need to
never got
figure
it.
that out. Yeah,
I
okay.
never
So I
got
need to, I don't know why. So I will try to figure that out.
Were
as
you
soon as
doing
possible.
Comcast? Were you doing Comcast?
No, I'm Gmail.
No,
No,
she
no, I
means
mean when you
email.
tried me, because you may have been trying an old Verizon. I used to be Verizon.
Yes, I was using the Verizon one.
That's why.
Okay, I'll update that. I'll update it. I'm glad you were able to make it. And thank you everyone for coming and making this a translation, a special translation, special, I guess. And also,
Thank you, Alex, for calling me and saying,
special,
hey.
You're welcome, Rena. And thank you everyone for the reading, and thank you, Len, for capable hosting.
Yes.
And thanks, Jan, Maryann, Sally, and Lee.
Yeah.
You're wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So long, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
See you guys next
We're
time.
through playing now.
Lunchtime.
Dinner time.
Oh.